out the motherfucking pack.
Right out
But
the
niggas don't know
best.
how to act.
Hello, 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 and welcome back to yet another draft video. I just did my mock draft, my 2 round mock draft, which took everything out of me. That shit took hours and hours and hours to make. But we are back already. Around draft time, I don't know what it is. I just get motivated to make hella draft related videos. So this is not a video related to this year's draft. This is a video related to the 2018 draft because I really enjoy doing the whole regrading certain drafts from certain years and all that. So today we're going to be going over the 2018 draft because it has been 6 full years. 6 years. I thought it was only going to be 5 years, but I don't know why I wasn't thinking about that right. But yeah, it's been 6 years for these guys since they've been drafted. And I think it's pretty fair to look at their careers as a whole. You have some guys where it's an exception, they have been turning it up as of late. They didn't start out so well, maybe with a new team. It sorry, I blanked out for a second. But you get what I'm saying. But we will be grading each player based off what they did for the team that drafted them. So we'll get into it pretty. You guys will pick up on it pretty quickly. So let's get right into it. Here we go. The entire 2018 first round. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit more. No, that's fine. So we have future Hall of Fame, great, good, average, injury riddled, which unfortunately will have a lot of guys in it, bad, and bust. So let's get right into it, man. Of course, I got the trusty notepad with me. I have it for every video at this point. But thank you for watching. Let's get right into it. Baker Mayfield. We have one of the strangest right off the bat. Obviously, the number one pick. Um, and this is already a situation where we have a guy who I feel like has gotten better since he left the team that drafted him. So if we're talking about Baker overall as a player, I'd probably have him in this good category. But strictly talking about what he did with the Browns, only played there for about 4 seasons, I believe. So we're going to stick him in average because at the end of the day, he did win a playoff game with the Browns, which say what you want about it. No quarterback has done that before or since, I believe, with the Browns. So that is still incredibly impressive. And like I said, I think he's gotten better. I think his time with the Buccaneers had, especially just this season, was the best season of his career. And I do think he has turned it around and is looking to improve himself as a player. But strictly with the Browns, a lot of ups and downs. It's going to be average. Next up, we got Mr. Nine Mistakes Were Made Ahead of Me. This guy, fucking Josh Rosen, was an absolute bust. Just the total definition of the word. After one season in Arizona, the Cardinals found it necessary to move on from him immediately. They drafted Kyler Murray, shipped him off to who knows where, and he never even became a starter again in his career. So, yeah, in a way, I kind of feel bad for him, but not really because he said that there were 9 mistakes ahead of him. Like if he would have been like a humble guy and the Cardinals would trade him after 1 year, I would have been like, oh, that's tough. He kind of got screwed over a little bit, but he was cocky, he was arrogant, and he's already out of the league. So definition textbook bust, Josh Rosen. Next up, we got Minka Fitzpatrick. This is so interesting because obviously, if we're just talking about talent and what he's done in the league so far, he's a future Hall of Famer. However, he was not drafted by the Steelers. He was drafted by the Dolphins. And I don't remember the situation around this, but he only played like 18 games with the Dolphins before he got traded to the Steelers. I think the Dolphins got a first round pick in return, but I thought they spent like a top 10 pick to get Minka. And he was amazing off the bat. So I really don't remember the situation that surrounded this trade in the first place. But since he only gave the Dolphins 18 games. Now they did get a first round pick in return, so that is also going to be included here. Like if a guy left the team that drafted him, but they like got a lot of like compensation in return, like the Dolphins got a first round pick back. So if we're just talking about 18 games, like that's really nothing. Like that's a bad pick to only get 18 games out of a first round pick. but they also got a first round pick back in return. So I'll put him at average. And it's such a weird situation because he might be the best player on this whole list. But because he didn't really do anything for the Dolphins, I can't put him any higher than average. Now, at the end of the video, I am going to reorganize everybody based off just what they are as a player overall and not what they did for the team that drafted them. So we'll get to see how good this draft class really was. But a couple really weird guys to start this list off. Next up, we have Vita Vea, though. I'm gonna put Vita Vea in the great tier. He's not a future Hall of Famer, in my opinion. However, he is an extremely effective nose tackle for the Buccaneers. He played a key role in that Super Bowl winning defense. He has won 3 playoff games with the Buccaneers, which if you would have told somebody that 10 years ago, they would have probably laughed at you. He's also made a Pro Bowl, which is massive. He is massive, and he has had 11 sacks in the last 2 years as a guy who's not really known for his pass rushing ability. So Vita Vea does his job to the highest extent. Um, and yeah, I think he's given the Bucks exactly what they were looking for when they drafted him. So you can't really argue with that too much. Next up, though, we got Daron Payne, drafted 1 pick after Vita Vea. And this is an interesting one because you could argue that he is a better player. He has also made only 1 Pro Bowl, but in that season, he had 11 and a half sacks, which is more than Vita Vea has had in his last 2 years, which were both career highs for him combined. He's had 30 sacks overall, 344 tackles, 53 TFLs, 66 QB hits. He is incredibly talented. And, you know, and he had and also has not missed a game in the last 4 years. Daron Payne is one of the better DTs in the league. Um, and I actually think he's better than Vita Vea. So I'm actually going to move him a little bit. The only thing Vita Vea has over him is that Super Bowl ring. But I feel like if you replace him with Daron Payne, they still won a Super Bowl. You know what I mean? So yeah, Daron Payne, underrated, kind of slept on, got a massive extension from the Commanders, I believe. So they already believe in him. So yeah, he was also a great pick. Back to back great defensive tackles in that draft class. Next up, I actually did not recognize this guy at first. That's Marcus Davenport, drafted by New Orleans. And this is gonna be the first guy, unfortunately, that gets stuck in the injury riddled tier. He only played 5 years in New Orleans. Now you might think only 5 years. Well, he missed 25 games in those 5 years. It's an average of 5 per season, and he played 63 games with the Saints, and he had 21 and a half sacks. 21 and a half sacks in 63 games. Now, if you look at that, you probably think, man, this guy was just a complete bust. Why are you even putting him in the injury riddled tier? Well, he had 10 and a half sacks in his first 2 years. Keep in mind where he missed a good amount of time. So that he got off to a good start, I'd say. He showed a lot of potential, and he even had 9 sacks in 2021, where he missed several games in that season. So the flashes were there. I feel like the talent was there, but he just could not stay healthy, was not consistent enough. And in his last season in New Orleans, in 15 games, he only had half a sack. So, yeah, just a very shaky, inconsistent career in New Orleans. He played for the Vikings last year, but only played like 3 games. So, yeah, Davenport not able to maximize his potential in the league. Next up, though, Colton Miller. Here's a guy who got off to a really rough start, but as of late, really turned his career around. I'm gonna put him the first guy in this good category. He's never made a Pro Bowl or anything like that, but he is still with a team that drafted him. He has played 92 out of 99 potential games, so he does not miss much time. And he also signed a 3 year, $54 million extension. So that shows you what the Raiders think about him. So, shout out to Colton Miller, turning his career around after a rough start, getting himself a big payday, and I think he's viewed around the league as just a pretty good tackle. So yeah, I think that's the perfect tier for him. Next up, we got Tremaine Edmonds from the Bills. Now, only played 5 years with the Bills. He left for the Bears last offseason, but he got a massive contract from the Bears. So it's not like the Bills didn't want him anymore. It's simply because he played so well, he earned himself a massive contract from somewhere else. So the question is, do I think he did enough with the Bills to warrant him being in that great tier in just 5 years? I'm gonna say yes. I'm gonna say yes. He belongs. I'm actually gonna put him at the top of this great tier, even though he only played 5 years. In those 5 years, he did a lot. Man, he made 2 Pro Bowls. over 100 tackles in each of those 5 years, and he helped the Bills win 4 playoff games. I feel like in such a short amount of time, only 5 years. You think about that, 4 playoff wins for the Bills. I remember when they weren't even making the playoffs for long stretches of several seasons at a time. So I feel like when Bills fans look back 10 years from now at this era, they'll mention Tremaine Edmonds as one of those guys that really got them on the right track. So I think it was worth the pick by the Bills, gave them 5 good years, and like I said, helped them with a lot of playoff success. Next up, we got Derwin James here. Obviously, injuries is kind of what he's been known for. But when this guy is healthy, man, he's the best player on this list so far. I'm going to stick him in this future Hall of Fame tier, the first guy to achieve that. You know, he's only had 4 seasons where I would consider him to be healthy. The other 2 seasons, he's played like a combined 5 games. So in those 4 healthy seasons, he's made the Pro Bowl 3 out of those 4 times. And in each of those seasons, he's had at least 105 tackles, 5 passes defended, 2 sacks. This guy is all over the field. He makes plays at all 3 levels. But the problem, like I said, Derwin James has only played 66 out of 99 games. So that's 33 games missed. That's basically 2 full years of his career. He has not played yet. But man, he has had 3 straight healthy seasons. So it gives me more confidence. With this future Hall of Fame tier, you kind of have to do some predicting a little bit, kind of projecting out the rest of their career. But him being healthy 3 years in a row does give me a lot of confidence moving forward that he can stay, keep his health on track and just continue to rack up these achievements, these all pros, these Pro Bowl teams. And, you know, man, it just makes you wonder though if he didn't miss those 2 years, would he already have a Hall of Fame level career? Would he have 5 Pro Bowl selections by now? Like that's the thing I think about with Derwin James. Like this guy is so talented. If he just wasn't hurt those 2 years, man, we could be talking about one of the best safeties ever for the first 6 years of his career. Moving on though, we got Jair Alexander. You know, this one's more difficult than Derwin James because I think Jair Alexander has only had 3 healthy seasons, or I would label them as healthy. His rookie year, he missed several games, so I don't really consider that. So only 3 healthy seasons for Jair Alexander, but he's made the All Pro team in 2 out of those 3 years. So this is tough, man. I'm gonna put him in the Hall of Fame tier. I do think he has the talent, but he has missed 26 games. He's only played 71 out of 99. And this is the thing I don't like compared to Derwin James, who's played 3 straight healthy seasons. Jair Alexander in the last 3 seasons has missed 24 games. So that's damn near 8 games a year. So he really has struggled with his health as well. But like I said, the talent is undeniable. If this guy's healthy, he's an all pro level cornerback. So it's a little more difficult for me to put him in this tier than it was Derwin James, but still, with only playing 3 full seasons, he's made 2 all pro teams. So he's still one of the most accomplished guys on this entire list. So like I said, if you want to put him in the great tier, I understand that. If you want to put him in the injury riddled tier, I understand that. But making multiple all pro teams in 6 years gives me enough reason to put you in the future Hall of Fame tier. Next up, we got Leighton Vander Esch. This is pretty easy. This is another injury riddled guy. Look, he made an all pro team, second team all pro as a rookie at like 140 tackles. It was very impressive. But in the last 5 years since that rookie season, he's missed 28 games. And I believe he actually has he already retired, or I think he was going to retire. He's had so many injuries up to this point. His career has kind of been derailed. He's just not the same guy he was as a rookie. And I just don't think he'll ever be the same. If he does continue to play, I'm not even sure if it will be with the Cowboys. He might just retire. So his career is essentially over already, which is pretty sad. Only played 6 years, but it was a good 6 years. If I had to put him in a tier, it'd probably be, low good, high average, something like that. But unfortunately, just missed too much time. And on top of that, his career is essentially over now. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to put him in that injury riddled tier. Saquon Barkley. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say this is the toughest guy to grade because I mean, what do you say? He is honestly, you could convince me that he belongs in the future Hall of Fame tier, the great tier, the good tier, the average tier. the injury riddled tier, and the bad tier. I'm actually going to put him the first player in the bad tier, and let me explain. Saquon is a great player. However, we're talking about the impact he had for the Giants being the second overall pick in this draft class that, as you're going to see, has had several Hall of Famers, several Hall of Fame level quarterbacks when the Giants themselves had no quarterbacks. They took Saquon Barkley at number 2. And the question I would ask, because he's missed 25 games in these 6 years, has Saquon Barkley, from when he was drafted to right now, made the Giants better? I would say no. Because when they drafted him, they had the number 2 overall pick. Now they have the number 6 overall pick. In 6 years, even though they did win a playoff game in that time, they only made one playoff appearance, and they're right back where they started, essentially. I think if they would have drafted a Josh Allen or traded down for Lamar Jackson, it would have turned their whole franchise around. Whereas Saquon Barkley, they've kind of gone in a full circle here. Now, if we're talking about Saquon the player, he has made the Pro Bowl in his 2 healthiest years. That's very important to me. He has had 4 seasons of over 1,200 yards from scrimmage, even though in 2 of those seasons he's missed a significant amount of time. Um, the talent is undeniable, but between his health issues and just not being able to carry the Giants offense on his back, I'd have to say as a pick, as a draft selection, in hindsight, 2020, it was a bad decision by the Giants. Not Saquon's fault whatsoever. Him getting hurt is not his fault whatsoever. But 6 years later, they're right back where they started with just nothing going for them. So yeah, but like I said, you could convince me of literally any of these tiers for Saquon besides bust. So it's a tough question to answer where he belongs on this list. Next up, we got Frank Ragnow. And this may take some people by surprise, but I got Frank Ragnow as a future Hall of Famer. And let me tell you why. He has made 3 straight Pro Bowls when he's healthy. One of those years he got hurt, season-ending injury. But he has played 80 out of 99 possible games. He has 2 All-Pro selections in 5 healthy years. And he also signed a 4-year extension in 2021. Keep in mind, 2021, that's only like 3 seasons or 4 seasons after he was drafted. He signed a long-term extension. And moving forward, like I said, a lot of this has to do with projecting their career forward. He is on a very good, very young Lions team that could possibly win a Super Bowl in his time. He has kind of been a big reason of why people talk about the Lions O line as such a strength. And I just think he's going to continue to make all pro and Pro Bowl teams moving forward. He's going to play on a very good Lions team, and he's going to have a accomplished career by the time it's all said and done. And I think he's going to be a Hall of Famer as one of the best centers in the 21st century. It's pretty simple, actually. So yeah, I think Frank Ragnow, just due to the amount of accomplishments and possibly rings he could rack up, is a surefire future Hall of Famer. Complete opposite end of the spectrum now. Let's talk about this guy. I had no idea who this guy was when I first saw the picture. And then I looked up the draft class and I still had no recollection of this name. This guy is named Billy Price, and he was drafted by the Bengals 1 pick after Frank Ragnow. He's also a center. And man, the difference could not be any farther. Um, he only lasted 3 years with the Bengals, was awful all 3 of those years, and he came in as a 24-year-old rookie. Now, that's usually not something I'd mind for offensive and defensive linemen because that means they've had more time to like grow into their bodies. It's such a physical league that I actually kind of want center or offensive linemen and defensive linemen and linebackers and stuff like that to be more experienced, to be a little older. But this guy came in 6 years removed from high school, only lasted 3 years with the Bengals, and stunk it up. You could honestly attribute this to a big part of the reason why the Bengals O line has been so bad for so many years. Just whiffing on this pick, him playing so bad when he was out there, and man, 1 pick away from Frank Ragnow. That makes you think, like, what if the Lions took Billy Price, the Bengals took Frank Ragnow? That could just, man, that would have been wow. Bengals might have won the goddamn Super Bowl if they had Frank Ragnow instead of Billy Price. But yeah, complete opposite ends of the spectrum. Same position, one pick apart. It's kind of crazy. Next up, we got Isaiah Wynn. This is tough, man. Played 5 years for the Patriots. I'm just going to put him in this injury riddled tier because he played 5 years for the Patriots. He left last offseason, but he only played 43 games in those 5 years, which is kind of just crazy to me. 43 games in five. That's an average of 8 games a season. He never made a Pro Bowl, never was an All Pro. And he came like right as the Patriots fell off, so he never even made like I believe his rookie year actually that he missed. He made the he made and won the Super Bowl, but he didn't play actually. So it's tough to say about that, but you know, and he only played 7 games with the Dolphins. So this is the guy that just can't stay healthy. When he was out there, I think he was solid. He probably belongs in this average tier just based off talent. But if you only play 43 games in 5 years, I can't even rank you. So that's tough on that part. Next up, though, DJ Moore. This is also a very interesting one. So when he was in Carolina for 5 years, he had at least 940 yards from scrimmage in each of those seasons, which is incredibly impressive for a wide receiver on a bad team, mind you. He never made a Pro Bowl in Carolina, even though you could probably argue he may have deserved one. Never made a playoff game, but he was also a part of that trade for Carolina that arguably set them back several years, which is not his fault whatsoever. It's this I'm talking about the dysfunction of the Panthers management. So even though he was a great player in Carolina, I'm only going to have this as a good pick because the trade that got him out of Carolina also arguably hurt the team. So it's so tough because like he'd be a great player. Like once I reorganize this list, you'll see he'll be at the great tier. But in Carolina, even though he was also still a great player, his impact kind of is lessened by how he left. And when he was there, he didn't really help them do anything. Not to say, like, he still was their number one receiver for 5 years, right? But they never made the playoffs. He never made a Pro Bowl himself. And him exiting hurt the team. So I don't know, man. I just feel like this pick, they mismanaged DJ Moore's career and they're worse off because of it. Not his fault, it's the Panthers' fault. So, that is what it is. Next up, we got Hayden Hurst. I'm actually going to throw Hayden Hurst in this bust category. Most people probably wouldn't even think of him as a bust. Most people probably even think of him as a first round pick. He was kind of like a later, like first round. He was like 27, 28. I think they got Mark Andrews in the same draft class. So that kind of just sucks for Hayden Hurst because Mark Andrews came in as a later pick and just completely outworked him and took over his spot. So Hayden Hurst, after only 28 games for the Ravens, got traded. So it's actually not that bad for the Ravens because you still got your franchise tight end in the same draft. It's like the Niners with Trey Lance and Brock Purdy. So it doesn't actually hurt that bad, but you still wasted a first round pick. You get what I'm saying? Because this is his stats for the Ravens in his career: 43 catches, 512 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That's what you got out of a first round pick. So I don't. So it's just I can't put him any higher than bust because he did nothing as a first round pick, and he's already 30 years old on top of that, which is crazy to me. But hey, it is what it is. Uh, Hayden Hurst did nothing for the Ravens, so he's in the bust category. Next, we got Calvin Ridley, another interesting one. Not the traditional career by any means. Um, it's tough, man. He only played 49 games for the Falcons. Obviously, the gambling situation derailed his whole career. I'm gonna put him in the average tier. This is weird because all these players in this average tier I think are significantly higher than average, but it didn't go well with the team that drafted them. In his first 3 years in Atlanta, keep this in mind, he had 26 touchdowns, 3,061 yards. So he got off to a great start. He should have been a Pro Bowler, and I think it was his second or third year. Um, but he never made the playoffs with the Falcons, never made the Pro Bowl. Kind of similar to the DJ Moore situation, except he played significantly less than DJ Moore. Um, and also the gambling situation. Falcons had to trade him for pennies, I believe. Did they cut him or trade him? I don't even remember. But they got really nothing back for him. So I'm gonna say it was a waste of a first round pick because his career in Atlanta did not amount to anything. Now, salute to Calvin Ridley for bouncing back, putting together 1,000-yard season last year in Jacksonville. He will be a guy that goes into this good category as a player, but in Atlanta, not what they were hoping for, certainly. Next up, we got Rashad Penny. I'm gonna keep this short because this actually hurts me as a Seahawks fan. He's an injury riddled tier, man. It's nothing much to say. Played 42 games in 5 years, just man, and only had 1 year where he had over 500 yards from scrimmage. It was just more. He missed more games than he played. It feels like so. Yeah, that one hurts. I wish his career went differently. I liked him a lot as a Seahawks fan, but it just he could never get over the injuries. Next up, we got Terrell Edmonds, brother of Tremaine Edmonds, if you could not guess. But this is actually just the most easy average I've ever seen. He played 5 years in Pittsburgh, 5 solid years, 5 average years. He only missed 3 games in those 5 years, so salute to him. He was very durable. He never made the Pro Bowl. He was never that type of a guy. They never won a playoff game with him. He made 2 playoff appearances with the Pittsburgh Steelers, but um, you know, and you can't really be mad at it because with a later first round pick that was somewhere in the 20s, they got a starting safety for 5 years. So pretty average, not too good, not too bad. Next up, we got Taven Bryan. At first, I was going to put him in this bad category, but I'm actually going to put him in the bust category. This was the Jaguars pick they made after the Saxonville season where they made the AFC Championship game, and he just did not contribute at all. Keep in mind, they could have got Lamar Jackson with this pick. They took Taven Bryan. So yeah, that's tough, man. He played 4 years in Jacksonville, and by the time he left, he was just the same player in terms of production as when he got there. He had 5.5 sacks, 5.5 sacks in 63 games. He was just nothing as a pass rusher. Um, at his and he's still in the league, he's still playing, but he is a rotational defensive tackle, right? Who should have been drafted in the third or fourth round. And instead he was a first round pick and just gave the Jaguars nothing. So he's a bust in my opinion. Next up we got Sam Darnold. I feel like most people know the story here. Got drafted to the Jets. Adam Gase was the head coach, so he was doomed from the start. Did nothing with the Jets. Career derailed. And since he left the Jets, he's actually kind of, been improving. I think he's in a good spot right now with the Niners being a career backup, and he's not that bad actually anymore. But with the Jets, he was pretty awful. So he clearly goes into that bust category. Next up, we got Mike Hughes. This is interesting because I don't know why he has a Chiefs logo or Chiefs jersey in this picture. He was drafted by the Vikings, but he is absolutely a bust for the Vikings. But he's kind of gotten better as his career goes on. But he played 24 games for the Vikings. He missed 24 games for the Vikings, so he was a part-time player, came in half the time, and was not very good. But once he left the Vikings, so he was completely injury riddled, right? Since he left the Vikings in the last 3 years, he's played 48 games, so he's not missed much time for 3 different teams, and he actually is coming off a career year with the Falcons where he was pretty solid. So I think he's actually like an average player, but unfortunately for the Vikings, he provided nothing whatsoever. So he was a bust certainly, but shout out to Mike Hughes for kind of turning his career around. Next up, we got Sony Michel. This is this might be the first guy who was better, who is a tier higher than what they were as a player because he was drafted by the Patriots, played a massive role his rookie season and then winning a Super Bowl. He was amazing in that playoff run. So, and he had nearly 2,000 yards his first 2 years from scrimmage. So he was a good player his first 2 years, but he fell off quickly, only played 3 years in New England and did nothing after that. So for the Patriots, he was an average player because he helped them win a Super Bowl. But overall, he played 5 years and now he's out of the league. Like he's a bad player. But with the Patriots, he was a massive contributor. So it's weird. He's one of the weirdest players on this whole list, but I have to put him no lower than average because he contributed a lot to the Patriots. Next up, we got Lamar Jackson. I didn't even have any notes for him besides future Hall of Famer. If you have to ask why Lamar is a future Hall of Famer when he has 2 MVPs in like 4 years, I think I don't know what to tell you. Lamar, easy, future Hall of Famer. Next up, Denzel Ward. I'm gonna put Denzel Ward in the future Hall of Famer tier because he is a three-time Pro Bowler. Um, which includes, this is the thing I like about this. He was a Pro Bowler as a rookie, right? But he was also a Pro Bowler last season. So this is not a guy who peaked early, who is just coming on late. He is a guy who's been pretty consistent throughout his entire 6 years with the Browns. And he leads all cornerbacks. Every cornerback in his draft class, he has the most interceptions. He has had at least 10 passes defended every season in his career, which is incredibly difficult to do. It also shows how durable he's been to be able to get that every season. And he also signed a 5 year, $100 million extension with the Browns. So he's going to be there for a while. And he may be one of, if not the highest paid players from this entire draft class. So I don't know how you could put him any lower than as a future Hall of Famer. Gave the Browns everything they were looking for. Next up, Bradley Chubb. This is tough. I'm going to put him in the injury riddled tier because that makes the most sense. Played about 4.5 years with the Broncos, but only played 49 games, which means that's about, what do you want to call it, like 10 games a season if it's 4.5 seasons. Um, you know, he had 25 and a half sacks and 57 QB hits in those 49 games. So not even all that impressive. You could argue he peaked as a rookie, where he was in the mix for Defensive Rookie of the Year. Then after that, it was all downhill, injury after injury. They eventually traded him to the Dolphins, and I'll say this: his last season, this past season with the Dolphins, arguably a career year there. So I'm gonna put him in the great tier when I reorganize it. But for the Broncos, too many injuries. They had to trade him. Did not last that long. So a disappointing Broncos career. But shout out to him for turning it up as of late. Next up, we got Quentin Nelson. This is the easiest pick ever for future Hall of Fame. He's actually going to go at the very top of this list. Quentin Nelson was the highest drafted offensive guard I can think of. Like everybody knew he was going to play guard, and it did not stop the Colts from drafting him in like the top 6 or 8, I think. He is a four-time All-Pro. Scratch that. He has made a Pro Bowl every season of his career. You get what I'm saying? He's missed 4 games in 6 years, and all 4 of those games were in the same season. So he's played 5 seasons without missing a game. And he played a season where he missed 4 games, was still a Pro Bowl. Like, this guy is amazing. This guy is arguably the best offensive guard in the league, arguably going to be one of the best offensive guards ever, the most accomplished player, one of the most accomplished players ever in his first 6 years. I mean, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He could retire now and possibly be a Hall of Famer. So he still has a lengthy career ahead of him, I would think. So yeah, Quentin Nelson might be the best player on this whole list. He is in terms of accomplishments. Next up, we got Josh Allen. Yeah, I'm gonna put Josh Allen in the future Hall of Fame list or tier. Some people might be upset at that, but at the end of the day, Josh Allen, um, he's a two-time Pro Bowler, and 3 out of the last 4 seasons, he's finished top 5 in MVP voting. So it's only a matter of time before he wins MVP. He's going to remain with the Bills, so it's no issue there in terms of team that drafted him. So I mean, I don't think anybody would argue that Josh Allen is going to be a Hall of Famer, right? I feel like that's a pretty agreed upon statement right there. So I don't know. No need to even argue that. Roquan Smith. This one's tough. This one's tough because he's a Hall of Fame level player, but with the Bears, it's tough. It's tough. I'm gonna put him at the top of the great tier because with the Bears, he made 2 All-Pro teams. He had over 100 tackles in all 4 years. He only missed 4 games in 4 seasons. So he was a great player for the Bears. He was a Hall of Fame level talent, but in only 4 seasons, he never won a playoff game. So I can't put him any higher than this due to the short time span. However, overall, as he's proven since he's gotten to the Ravens, he is a Hall of Fame level player. So he is going to move one tier higher after I rank Mike McGlinchey. He's average. Played 5 years. Actually, he just played 6 years. No, he played 5 years with the 49ers. Only missed 11 games in those 5 years. Um, you know, inconsistent. I'm sure you'll find several Niners fans that say this guy was good for him overall. You'll find several fans that say they wish he would have left sooner. Um, Most people will say the Broncos overpaid him in free agency, but yeah, pretty average overall. So now let's reorganize this tier. People who I think belong in the Hall of Fame tier, definitely put Roquan Smith in there. Um, Minka definitely in that tier. Great players. I'm gonna put DJ Moore. Uh, I'm gonna put Bradley Chubb in there because he's had two very, very good seasons already in 6 years. The good tier, put Baker, put Calvin Ridley, um, put Saquon in the great tier as well, just based off talent. That is. Um, I'll put Sam Darnold. I'll put these guys in the bad. I'll put Mike Hughes in the average tier. Tony Michelle in the bad tier. So yeah, this is how I think the list looks. And look, man, 9 Hall of Famers, 9 Hall of Famers from one draft class is ridiculous. I'm not sure how this will stack up compared to the other draft classes we do because I'm gonna do every class moving forward. So it actually might make sense because since these guys have had like more time to build out their resumes and their careers, this might end up being the best draft class on paper. But I don't. We'll have to see because man, I don't know if any of the draft class is going to have 9 guys in this future Hall of Fame tier because that's a lot, man. 2 quarterbacks, was that 3 DB, 4 DBs, 2 linemen, linebacker? Like man, yeah, it's a great draft. Also, a lot of great players in there too. Multiple guys in the good tier who could eventually become in the great tier. You know what I mean? So it was a pretty good draft. Pretty good draft. Uh, that's gonna be the end of the video though. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Comment if you think I got anybody wrong. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
It's out the motherfucking pack. Right out the niggas don't know how to act.